The studio lights flared like 1,000 suns. Cameras whirred. International journalists whispered into microphones, their voices echoing across continents. It was billed as the Global Leaders Forum, a live broadcast watched by over 90 million people. The topic: Africa's role in the 21st century world. U.S. President Donald Trump leaned back in his chair, smirking, waiting for his turn. He didn't wait long. "Let's be honest," Trump said, voice thick with sarcasm. "Without us, Africa wouldn't even have roads. We built everything they use today." There was an awkward silence. Some chuckled nervously. A few reporters lowered their heads, embarrassed. But on the far right of the long, elegant table sat Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Dressed in his simple uniform, no flashy medals, no exaggerated gestures, just calm. He looked at Trump. No anger, no smile, just stillness. And in that stillness, something in the room shifted. Reporters stopped typing. A studio assistant dropped her tablet. Everyone could sense it. Something was about to happen. Something no one was prepared for. And Traoré, still silent, slowly leaned toward the mic. The world held its breath. The lights seemed to dim, though they hadn't. The tension was so thick it felt like the whole room had stopped breathing. Traoré finally spoke. "You speak of roads," he said quietly. "But what of the blood beneath them?" Trump blinked. The smirk faded. "You say you built Africa?" Traoré continued, his voice steady. "Tell that to the villages burned for rubber, the children forced to mine your cobalt, the leaders you removed when they refused to kneel." The room froze. Cameras zoomed in. Trump tried to interrupt, but Traoré raised a hand slightly, not aggressively, just enough to silence the room. "Do you even own your conscience?" he asked. No one laughed. No one spoke. On one of the studio monitors, a young African boy was shown walking barefoot through dust, holding a rusted school book. Another screen flashed to a woman in Congo, crying beside a collapsed mine. "These are not numbers, these are our people," Traoré said, eyes locked on Trump. It wasn't a speech, it was a soul crying out. And somehow, everyone in the studio, journalists, politicians, technicians, felt smaller. Even Trump. Backstage, a technician whispered, "Is this still being broadcast?" The answer, yes, to the entire world. It was the silence afterward that hit the hardest. The kind of silence that makes your chest hurt. The kind of silence that carries 400 years of pain, still unspoken. Trump shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He opened his mouth to speak, but then stopped. Because even he knew, anything he said now would only deepen the wound. A journalist from France wiped tears from her eyes. Another from Brazil slowly set down his pen. In Ghana, a school teacher paused the class and turned up the volume. In Chicago, a father who hadn't cried in years sat speechless on his couch. Across the world, people weren't just watching. They were feeling it. Traoré hadn't shouted. He hadn't cursed. But his truth cut deeper than any insult. He looked straight into the camera now. "To every child who grew up believing they were less, you are not," he said. "To every farmer who lost their land, we remember. And to every leader who dares to rise, we will not kneel." A producer backstage whispered, "He just changed history." Outside the studio, thousands had gathered, holding flags, crying, chanting his name. Inside, the cameras kept rolling, but no one could look away. Traoré's voice dropped, but his words hit even harder. "You call us broken," he said, turning to Trump. "But let me tell you a story." The studio was silent. "My grandfather was 12 when soldiers stormed his village. He watched them burn his father's crops. He watched them drag away his brother. And he never spoke again. Not a word, for 39 years. Trump blinked. The audience didn't move. He died with secrets he couldn't say, and pain no one ever apologized for. A woman in the crowd covered her mouth. A journalist whispered, "Is this real?" Traoré continued, "You want to know what Africa is? Africa is silence that no one hears, grief that never ends. And yet, we stand." His eyes scanned the room, pausing on the cameras. "And today I speak because they couldn't. I speak for the ones who died unnamed, so men like you could pretend we're ungrateful." The air grew heavier. One of Trump's aides reached for a note but dropped it. Every second felt like thunder. Traoré looked down, then up again, calm, but filled with fire. "I'm not here for applause," he said. "I'm here to remember." And suddenly, remembering felt like resistance. The camera zoomed in on Traoré's eyes. They didn't just see the present. They held centuries. "People ask why Africa struggles," he said, "but we've never been allowed to heal." He turned slightly to face the panel. 8 world leaders seated stiffly under glowing studio lights. "Our wounds aren't history lessons. They're still bleeding." A soft murmur spread across the room. Trump shifted in his chair. He smirked, but it looked forced now. "You speak of aid," Traoré continued, "but it's like giving us buckets while setting fire to our homes." His words were calm, controlled, but they burned. The lights above suddenly felt hotter. Even the host, a seasoned European journalist, was speechless. Traoré pulled a folded photo from his pocket. It was cracked and faded. "This is my cousin, Idrissa. He died in a gold mine collapse, digging metal for phones none of us could afford." He placed the photo on the table. No drama, no shouting, just truth. And that made it unbearable. A cameraman whispered, "Is this even allowed?" But the feed kept rolling. Every second broadcasted to the world. Traoré looked directly at Trump again. "You don't have to like us, but you will respect our dead." Behind the cameras, producers scrambled. They whispered frantically into earpieces. "Do we cut to commercial?" "No, we can't. Not now." Traoré continued. His voice softened. "I was 11 when a French plane flew over my village. I thought it was rain." He paused. It dropped bombs instead. The audience tensed. Some instinctively looked up, as if the past could fall from the ceiling. "My neighbor's daughter Mariam was 6. They found her under a broken table, still clutching a pencil." A woman in the crowd began to cry silently. Her hands trembled in her lap. "That pencil," Traoré said, "was her dream. She wanted to be a teacher." He held up a small wooden pencil. It looked ordinary, but in that moment, it felt sacred. No one was punished. No one said sorry. He turned to the audience now. "Tell me, what country deserves this?" Trump sat frozen, lips slightly parted. No comebacks, no bravado. For once, the man who always had something to say said nothing. And then, Traoré looked directly into the camera. "If Mariam's voice couldn't be heard, I will speak louder." The studio stayed silent, but the world was beginning to weep. Traoré slowly placed the pencil down beside the mic. Cameras zoomed in. It looked small, but it carried the weight of a continent. He reached into his pocket again, this time unfolding a piece of yellowed paper. "This is a letter," he said, "written by a young boy named Kosi from Togo. He wrote it to the president of a Western nation, begging them to stop taking the gold from his land." He unfolded it gently. He never got a reply. The studio was dead silent. He died the following year. The mine collapsed. He was 12. Trump looked uneasy. He fidgeted with his tie. Traoré read the letter out loud. The boy's words were simple. "Please let us keep some gold. My mother is sick. I want to help." A tear rolled down the cheek of a journalist in the front row. He believed someone would hear him, Traoré whispered. He folded the letter back. That's what hurts the most, that he thought someone cared. A long pause. Then Traoré said something that felt like thunder wrapped in calm. We are not asking for pity. We are demanding memory. And in that moment, even the cameras seemed to stop breathing. The moderator, a veteran European anchor named Lucia Brown, had hosted over 600 global broadcasts. She had covered wars, elections, and royal funerals. But tonight, her voice cracked. She turned to Traoré. Captain, I didn't know. He nodded gently. That's the problem, no one does. And those who do, forget. Trump tried to interject, his voice louder now. Are you blaming the West for everything? That's ridiculous. Traoré didn't flinch. No, he replied. I am blaming silence, yours, ours, the silence that buries children while the world debates their worth. Lucia stood, stepping back from the table. I need a moment, she said quietly. It was the first time in her career she walked off air, while live. The studio scrambled. The broadcast director whispered, Stay on Traoré. The camera returned to him, alone, steady, unshaken. I don't need applause, he said softly. I need the world to feel this. Not for me, for the ones who were never given a mic. He tapped the table once, firm, controlled, and millions of viewers felt it in their chest. One single comment appeared instantly on the live stream chat. I haven't cried this hard since my father died. Traoré turned back to Trump. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't insult. He just looked him in the eye, with the quiet strength of 1,000 unheard stories. I don't hate you, he said. Trump was startled. What? I said, I don't hate you. That's too easy. Hate takes energy we've already lost. We are simply tired. Tired of being spoken about, but never to. He leaned in slightly. You call us beggars. Yet every year billions leave our shores. Through oil, gold, and silent contracts your companies sign with the few corrupt among us. Trump looked down. For the first time, he didn't respond. Not even with a smirk. And that's when it happened. He looked away, not out of shame, but out of discomfort. The truth was too heavy. Traoré noticed. I'm not asking for you to look at me, he said. I'm asking you to look at what your world refuses to see. A photo appeared on the studio screens. African children walking barefoot beside a luxury resort, built with African stone, owned by a foreign company. The image hit harder than any speech. The truth was undeniable now, and the world was beginning to cry. Traoré stood still, hands lightly resting on the table. He didn't blink. He didn't flinch. We know what it feels like to be forgotten, he said softly. We know what it's like when your pain is just background noise to someone else's comfort. Images on the studio screen changed again. A collapsed school in Sierra Leone. A mother cooking with ashes because there was no fuel. A girl walking 10 kilometers for dirty water. These are not tragedies of nature, Traoré continued. They are the result of choices. Choices made in rooms where our voices were never invited. Trump crossed his arms, his eyes darting toward the cameras, looking for someone to save him. No one did. Traoré continued. If a child is born in Boston, she is given a path. If a child is born in Ouagadougou, she is given a wall. His voice cracked, just slightly. A pause. And still, she climbs. Someone in the audience sobbed out loud. No one turned to look. They were too stunned by the truth unfolding in front of them. Traoré's final words in this chapter burned gently. We are not poor. We are robbed. And we remember the hands that took. The screen behind Traoré went dark, then slowly lit up with a single photo. A woman, wrinkled hands, scarred feet, carrying firewood with a child strapped to her back. "That's my mother," Traoré said, voice trembling now. The crowd held its breath. She walked 7 kilometers a day to fetch water, worked 2 jobs, and never once complained. He swallowed. "She taught me math using rocks, and courage using silence." Trump glanced away again. He looked pale now. This wasn't the kind of power he understood. "My mother had no degrees, but she had strength, real strength." Traoré paused, closing his eyes for a moment. "She died without ever stepping inside a hospital. Not because she was too weak, but because her country was treated as too small to matter." Tears slipped down his cheek. He didn't wipe them. "I stand here because of her. I speak because she could not." The moderator had returned, silent and red-eyed. She leaned toward her mic and whispered, "Take your time, Captain." He nodded, voice softer now. "My story is not rare. That's what makes it so painful. It is too common, too ignored, too real." And across the globe, people wept like it was their own mother. The room was dead silent. Even the air felt heavy. Traoré exhaled slowly, as if holding generations inside his lungs. "You know what 400 years sounds like?" he asked. He tapped his chest once, like this. Boom. He tapped again. Boom. "Every heartbeat we've survived is proof we were never defeated, just denied." A thunderous stillness followed. "You say Africa is always in conflict," Traoré said, "but you never mention the weapons, where they come from, who profits when we bleed." A man in the audience looked visibly shaken. Traoré turned to the screen again. This time it showed a market in Mali, empty. Then a hospital with no electricity. Then a grave, unmarked, shallow, fresh. "You think we are angry? We are not," he said. "We are tired, but we have learned to carry grief like a drum, and we still march." Suddenly the live stream chat exploded. Thousands were commenting, "I'm crying in my living room. I didn't know. Why didn't I know? Please let him finish, please." Traoré looked into the camera one more time, his voice calm and final. "Pain kept in silence becomes poison. Today I pour it out so we can heal." Traoré stood taller now. His words had carried the pain of generations, but he still had more to say. He held up a small photo, worn at the edges. "This is Yakuba," he said gently. He was 8, bright eyes, always asking questions. The screen behind him showed a young boy smiling, holding a half-broken toy truck made from wire and bottle caps. He died in a flood, not because water came too fast, but because there were no drainage systems, no planning. Because the foreign companies that mined the nearby hills had stripped the trees and left. The studio was still, not even a cough. "He loved football," Traoré whispered. "He played barefoot with joy. He wanted to be a doctor." His voice cracked. "But he drowned in water mixed with mining waste." A reporter from Sweden wiped his eyes. Trump stared at the desk. No cameras came. No headlines were written. No one cared. Traoré looked into the lens. Yakuba never harmed anyone. His only mistake was being born where the world wasn't watching. And for the first time, many in the audience could no longer hold back their sobs. Africa had a voice tonight. And it was breaking hearts open. Earlier in the broadcast, Trump had laughed, mocked Africa's never-ending poverty, smirked about giving too much foreign aid. But now even he looked small. Traoré didn't need to raise his voice, because his silence had already conquered the room. "You talk about aid," he said, locking eyes with Trump. "Let me ask you, would you accept a glass of water from the man who set your house on fire?" Gasps rippled through the studio. Trump opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Traoré pressed on. You gave us mirrors, we needed medicine. You built embassies, we needed clean water. You gave speeches, we needed a chance. The live chat exploded again. I can't stop crying. Why didn't we know? He's speaking for all of us. Traoré raised a small object. It was a rusty spoon. This was found in the stomach of a boy in my country, he said. He was so hungry. He swallowed it trying to kill the hunger. The audience gasped. Trump's eyes widened. The camera zoomed in on the spoon. That child died, Traoré said, and no one called it terrorism. And that's when the world finally stopped laughing. The clock ticked loud in the background. Traoré now stood beside the table, no longer seated. He placed both hands on the surface, steady, grounded. I don't want pity, he said. I don't need tears. He paused, voice slow and firm. I am demanding respect for my people, for my land, for our right to live without being drained. Behind him, the screen changed again. This time it showed Africa's minerals, lithium, gold, cobalt, and the smiling logos of companies that owned the mines, none of them African. He pointed without even looking. Tell me, how are we poor when our soil feeds your satellites and your smartphones? No one answered. He turned slightly to Trump. You think power is speaking the loudest. I think power is speaking last, and with truth. Trump didn't respond. He didn't laugh. He just stared, jaw tight, unsure of what to say. And in that moment, the power had shifted. Not through money, not through weapons, but through pain that became truth. Traoré looked back at the camera and calmly said, You can rob our gold, you can silence our news, but you will never erase our memory. By the time Traoré sat back down, the studio was still frozen in silence. No one knew what to say. But outside, the world had erupted. The moment Traoré said, You will never erase our memory, someone had clipped it and posted it online. Within 4 minutes, it hit 3.2 million views. Hashtags trended, Here's Africa Speaks, or Here's Traoré Truth, not just aid but justice. In Lagos, people gathered in markets replaying the video on small screens. In Paris, African students marched with Traoré's photo. In South Africa, a grandmother whispered, That boy speaks for my father. Even in parts of America, students walked out of schools to protest companies mining African land. But something deeper was happening. People weren't just angry. They were crying. They were reflecting. They were remembering names they had buried, in silence, for decades. Back in the studio, Trump looked like a man who had just seen the truth for the first time. He muttered something, but the microphone wasn't on. It didn't matter. This moment no longer belonged to him. It belonged to Africa. And the world had just witnessed a leader born, not from wealth, but from pain and truth. As the broadcast ended, the final image shown was simple but unforgettable. A little girl in a red dress, standing alone on red earth, holding a small hand-painted sign. Thank you, Captain. The photo had been sent live from Burkina Faso. Her name was Alima, 7 years old, orphaned by malaria, but still smiling. And now, millions knew her name. Traoré saw it on the screen. He didn't speak. He just placed his hand on his heart. Then, gently, he picked up Mariam's pencil and Yakuba's photo and held them together in his hands. No music, no words, just tears, everywhere. From old men in Ethiopia to young activists in Brazil, from war survivors in Palestine to farmers in Ghana. They weren't just watching a broadcast anymore. They were living it. Even world leaders who had remained quiet began to release statements. Some offered apologies. Some offered partnerships. But most just said one word: respect. That night, a candle was lit on every major university campus across West Africa. People stood in silence, repeating one sentence: We remember, we will rise, and we will never kneel again. And at the center of that storm stood Ibrahim Traoré, unshaken, loved, immortalized. The studio lights dimmed. Traoré walked off the stage with no security, no entourage, just the same quiet dignity he had arrived with. A reporter followed him. "Captain, what now?" He paused, turned, and smiled for the first time. "Now," he said, "we build." That clip became the most replayed 4 seconds of the year. In the days that followed, the video was shown in classrooms, churches, mosques, prisons, boardrooms. Even the UN held an emergency session and played Traoré's speech in full. For the first time in decades, Africa wasn't being spoken about. It was speaking for itself. And one man had held the mic, not to shame, but to awaken, not to beg, but to lead. That mic, simple, black, sitting on a glass table, was placed in a museum 1 month later. The plaque read, "The mic that spoke for the silenced." If this story made you feel something deep, if it reminded you of a truth you had forgotten, then don't let it end here. Like this video. Drop a comment. Let Traoré know what you felt. Subscribe, because these stories deserve to be remembered. Let's make sure the world never forgets what was said and who finally said it.